mindful breathing as an effective technique in the management of hypertension. This is printed in Frontiers in Physiology. Printed in the National Library of Medicine. Abstract. Introduction. Hypertension is one of the most modifiable factors for cardiovascular disease. The popularity of wearable devices provides an opportunity to test whether device-guided slow mindful breathing may serve as a pharmacological treatment in the management of hypertension. Methods. Fitbit Versa 3 and Sense devices were used for this study. In addition, participants were required to own an FDA or Health Canada approved blood pressure measuring device. Advertisements were shown to 655,910 Fitbit users, of which 7,365 individuals expressed interest and filled out the initial survey. A total of 1,918 participants entered their blood pressure readings on at least one day and were considered enrolled in the study. Participants were instructed to download a guided mindful breathing app on their smartwatch device and to engage with the app once a day prior to sleep. Participants measured their systolic and diastolic blood pressure prior to starting each mindful breathing session and again after completion. All measurements were self-reported and participants were located in the United States or Canada. Results. The values of systolic and diastolic blood pressure were reduced following mindful breathing, and there was also a decrease in resting systolic and diastolic measurements when measured over several days. For participants with a systolic pressure of less than 130, there was a decrease of 9.7 following 15 minutes of mindful breathing at 6 breaths per minute. When measured over several days, this resting systolic pressure decreased by an average of 4.3. Discussion. Mindful breathing for 15 minutes a day at a rate of 6 breaths per minute is effective in lowering blood pressure and has both an immediate and short-term effect over several days. This large-scale study demonstrates that device-guided mindful breathing with a consumer wearable for 15 minutes a day is effective in lowering blood pressure and a helpful complement to the standard of care. Introduction. Hypertension or high blood pressure is a very common condition affecting an estimated 44.4% of adults in the United States. The 2017 guideline for high blood pressure in adults defines elevated blood pressure as having a systolic pressure in the range of 120 to 129 and a diastolic pressure of less than 80. Stage 1 hypertension is defined as having a systolic pressure in the range of 130 to 139 or a diastolic pressure in the range of 80 to 89. Stage 2 hypertension is defined as having a systolic pressure of greater than 144 and a diastolic pressure of greater than 90. Hypertension is associated with major health risks and is a component of cardiovascular risk strokes, as well as metabolic syndrome severity scores. Only about half of all adults with hypertension had their blood pressure controlled in 2015 to 2016. Autonomic imbalance, sympathetic overactivity and or parasympathetic underactivity plays a pivotal role in the etiology of essential hypertension. Chronic stress has been associated with the development of hypertension through sustained blood pressure elevations over time, and among lifestyle choices that help to mitigate hypertension in the practice of mindful breathing. Slow breathing at 6 breaths per minute is an effective technique in preserving autonomic function, resulting in high respiratory sinus arrhythmia and baroreflex sensitivity. In hypertensive patients, breathing at a rate of 6 per minute have been shown to increase baroreflex sensitivity to values similar to those of healthy controls who were breathing spontaneously. Several studies have investigated the effect of slow mindful breathing on hypertension, and the results have been mixed. Some studies involving device-guided mindful breathing have found evidence for the reduction in blood pressure due to mindful breathing, while other studies have shown no benefit. Guided breathing devices already exist. For example, Respirate is an FDA-cleared commercial product designed to lower blood pressure using melody-guided breathing. A systematic review and meta-analysis of 8 trials of the Respirate device with trial arms of 4 weeks or greater was conducted by Monotny, Noonan, and Hannigan. Their analysis found that overall device-guided breathing resulted in a decrease of a systolic pressure of 3.06 and diastolic pressure by 2.35. However, when studies that were sponsored by or involved by manufacturers of device were excluded, there were no significant overall effect in either systolic or diastolic blood pressure. Thus, there is a need for further research on the topic. The rise in the popularity of wearable devices such as smartwatches, trackers, and rings ensures that research on mindful breathing can benefit a large number of people. In this article, we investigate the effect of device-guided slow mindful breathing on blood pressure using Fitbit devices. We show that 15 minutes of mindful breathing at a frequency of 6 breaths per minute is effective in temporarily lowering both systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Furthermore, the practice of mindful breathing over time is shown to lower the resting blood pressure as well. The training helps prevent high blood pressure too, and I think it's promising, says the prospects of integrating strength training for the respiratory muscles into preventative care. It could be beneficial for people who aren't able to do traditional aerobic exercise, and the simplicity is appealing too, given people can easily use the device at home. Taking a deep, resisted breath offers a new and unconventional way to generate the benefits of exercise and physical activity. Joyner concluded in an editorial that was published alongside a prior study in the Journal of the American Heart Association. Just exactly how does breath training lower blood pressure? Craighead points out the role of endothelial cells, which line our blood vessels and promote the production of nitric oxide, a key compound that protects the heart. Nitric oxide also widens our blood vessels, promoting good blood flow, which prevents the buildup of plaque in arteries. What we found was that 6 weeks of the inspiratory muscle strength training will increase the endothelial function by about 45%. Good for all ages. It's long been known that deep diaphragmatic breathing, often used during meditation or mindfulness practice, can help lower blood pressure too. Muscle training with the Power Breath device works in a similar way, engaging the breathing muscles and promoting the production of nitric oxide. The particular helpfulness of the device is that it requires less time to get the benefit because the machine adds the resistance that gives the muscles a good workout. His research is funded by the National Institutes of Health. The new study builds on the prior study and adds to the evidence that it's essentially strength training for the respiratory muscles and is beneficial for adults of all ages. We were surprised to see how ubiquitously effective the IMST is at lowering blood pressure. Before the results came in, he'd suspected that young, healthy adults might not benefit as much. But we saw robust effects, pointing to a significant decline in blood pressure for participants at all ages. He says the findings suggest that this could really help healthy young people prevent heart disease and the rise in blood pressure that tends to occur with aging. There may also be benefits for elite cyclists, runners, and other endurance athletes, citing that 6 weeks of the IMST increased the aerobic exercise tolerance by 12% in middle-aged and older adults. The mindful breathing is an effective technique in the management of hypertension. One of the main outcomes of the analysis is the possibility of a reduction in systolic pressure arising from a daily practice of mindful breathing for 15 minutes. We found that on average, the systolic pressure decreased by 4.3. The time to reach 90% of the asymptomatic value was found to be 15.2 days. We also found strong evidence for a dose-dependent effect for small values. The diastolic pressure shows only a small reduction of 1.6 when accounting for the decrease seen in the control set. Another significant finding was that reduction of systolic pressure depends on hypertension status and medication usage and not age or sex. Non-pharmacological treatments such as device-guided mindful breathing were found to be beneficial to participants with hypertension, and this technique may contribute to overall care in the management of hypertension. Although we have often also considered slow breathing in this work, movement exercises coupled with breathing, example Tai Chi, have also shown promise in the non-pharmacological management of hypertension. Conducted a 12-week randomized control study involving 63 female senior cancer survivors and found that the Tai Chi group had significantly lower systolic blood pressure, with no statistically significant difference in diastolic pressure. They conducted a 6-week randomized control trial to study the health benefits of simplified and Wu-style Tai Chi on the middle-aged and elderly, and they found that both Tai Chi groups showed a significant decrease in systolic pressure compared to the baseline, while only the Wu-style Tai Chi group showed a decrease in the diastolic pressure. The Framingham Risk Score is a useful technique to quantify the risk of cardiovascular disease. Elevated systolic pressure is one of the biggest modifiable factors for adverse cardiovascular events. The hazard ratio for the logarithm of systolic pressure when not treated with medications is 15.82 for females and 6.9 for females. The formula assigns a score indicative of the 10-year risk of developing cardiovascular disease, taking into account the person's age, sex, systolic blood pressure, total cholesterol, high-density lipoprotein cholesterol, smoking status, diabetes status, and whether blood pressure is controlled using medications. Due to the high hazard ratio of systolic pressure, even a modest reduction in systolic pressure can lead to a significant reduction in the risk of cardiovascular disease. As an example, consider an individual at age 40 with a total cholesterol of 200 milligrams, HDL 50 milligrams, and no history of smoking, diabetes, or blood pressure medications. Reducing the systolic blood pressure by 4.3 can reduce the 10-year risk of adverse cardiovascular events by as much as 9.4%. 8.7% for females with initial systolic of 120. For males, the equivalent decrease in risk was 6.6% for initial systolic of 120. There are several limitations to our work. A significant limitation is that blood pressure values were self-reported. There's no medical personnel to collect the data. Blood pressure recordings were taken from single measurements. Example, 1 measurement prior to mindful breathing and 1 measurement after mindful breathing. Although this practice is consumer-friendly, it is less precise than computing the mean of a number of measurements. Selection bias may be present, as participants were selected for individuals who own a Fitbit device and an FDA or Health Canada approved blood pressure measuring device. The control group is slightly older and skews males, although we do not find age or gender to be confounders. A follow-up study with more control participants may strengthen these findings. The study duration of 28 days did not permit us to do long-term assessments of blood pressure. Although these various limitations cannot be ignored, The study highlights the major role that commercial wearable devices can play in the management of hypertension.